Not often do I say this, but boy, do I mean it. What a privilege to be here today. And what I want to share, I want to make it meaningful for every one of you. With what I want to say even about this subject this morning, I cannot say in 45 minutes. So all four of my talks, this morning, this afternoon, tomorrow morning afternoon, is going to be one complete segment because it's too complicated. I've learned one thing years ago. All ideas have consequences. All consequences have ideas. Almost all events have a history. That's why I study as much how we got to where we are as to what the problem is. Because if you don't understand how do you get to where you are, what the problem is, you'll usually miss the bullseye. And I have to admit it, most Christians miss the bullseye. So I want you to use your minds. What I want to do is draw upon 52 years of working with young people. Man, I'm old. When I started ministry, the Dead Sea was only sick. It was that long ago. 5 decades of been traveling, writing, speaking, to 250 debates in universities and all, in communicating the truth. I want to put, especially this morning, this afternoon session, into this illustration. Do you remember the perfect storm? Back, I think it was in October, November, it's often called the Halloween storm because it started on Halloween Day. It was a perfect storm in 1995 that hit New England. And what there was, they saw it coming. There were 3 storm fronts that came together. One was out of Africa. They saw it forming. Almost all of our storms form right off African coast. They saw that huge storm forming. Then they had a northeastern coming down out of the north, which was huge. And then because the Atlantic Ocean would not cool down, it stayed warm, a huge storm front moved there, and all 3 moved together. And when it hit, it was not quite what's now the greatest storm that hit the Philippines, but it was one of the next biggest ones ever. But it was called the perfect storm. Right now, we have a perfect storm. It's not forming, it's hitting. It's already Halloween. In other words, it's already hit. What I want to do is today look at the 3 elements, the 3 storm fronts that are coming together. And then tomorrow, I'll look at some of the answers to it. I'll just touch this afternoon briefly on the answers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32, David is trying to unify the nations and the armies to strengthen his reign. And when the sons of Issachar came and gave their allegiance to him, the Word of God said this, that they were very fortunate because the sons of Issachar understood the times or had the knowledge of what Israel should do. The New American Standard put, they understood the times in order to know what to do. I truly believe if we don't study how we got to where we are in any situation, we truly will not intelligently know what to do and will miss the mark. This is one reason why I study more than I do in my preparation of the positive answer of how we got to where we are, and I study the equal amount of time for those that disagree with me. Because if you don't study those that disagree with you, you become too narrow in your focus, and you can be in error and not even know it on there. The first storm that I'm going to touch on here, and I only have time for one, is an epistemological shift. It's an intellectual storm, epistemological shift. Now somebody says, ooh, that's a big word. You know, I learned one thing over the years. All big words have little meanings. They really do. All big words have little meanings. We get the word epistle from epistemology. Epistemology simply means the study of the nature and the source of truth. In other words, epistemology, what is truth? Where does it come from? That's basically epistemology. We've had a total complete shift in what truth is and where it comes from. And I really believe as a pastor, as a parent, as a youth leader, as a speaker in culture today, if you don't understand this epistemological shift, you're probably really not communicating in a way that this generation understands. I really don't believe you are. I want to show you this epistemological shift and then the consequences of it. We will use the screen. I don't have a monitor, so I'll be switching around a lot. The screen, don't get ahead of me yet. The screen, don't jump ahead of me. The screen will be video screen of history. And for hundreds of years, this has been the paradigm. This has been the model of truth. At the top of the screen, you'll have a personal creator God. At the bottom of the screen, you have created man. For hundreds of years, the paradigm of truth was that all truth resided in a personal creator God. Anthropological truth, historical, scientific, philosophical, theological, metaphysical, all truth resided in a personal creator God. Man responded to that truth. Then onto the scene came a movement called the Renaissance. Now, folks, this is going to be a very, very simple analysis of it. If you want to leave me your email at the table out there, I will send you all the documentation for this with the other details and some of the other movements that took place and the timing of it and everything. I'll email that to you. You can have it as a gift. But the Renaissance came onto the scene. And they said, now, there's 4 movements I'm going to hit on, and each one analyzed a difference. They said, we don't need God. Why? See how great man is. This is when they started doing the statues, the graphics of the human body and everything. And what the Renaissance did was bring the concept that there's a personal creator God in which all truth resides about a quarter of the way down the video screen of history, and elevated man about a quarter of the way. And you know, I don't think historically it had gone much further than that if it hadn't been followed by the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment came onto the scene, and they said, we don't need God. Now notice the difference. See how great man can reason. Man can reason through the sin problem. Man can reason through salvation. I think the best graphic I've ever seen on the Enlightenment is this historic graphic of a captain in a ship in a huge storm. And Christ is standing there with his arm almost on his shoulder. And the caption would read, Christ is the master of my destiny. What the Enlightenment did was take Christ's hand off. Picture that in your mind. He took Christ's hand off, and the caption read, I am the master of my destiny. And what the Enlightenment did was bring the concept of a personal creator God another quarter of the way down history and elevated man about a quarter of the way. And then that was greatly affected years later by, I call it a movement. For years, I don't even think a lot of people today realize the implications metaphysically, philosophically, theologically, culturally to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution came onto the scene. And the Industrial Revolution said, we don't need God. Now notice the difference. See how great man can create. This is when the great patents, the machines, everything just exploded. And what the Industrial Revolution did was bring the concept of personal creator God another quarter of the way down history and elevated man. And you know, it wouldn't have gone much further than that if it hadn't been followed by the answer to 2 questions. None of these 3 could answer the origin of man and the origin of the universe. And then at the beginning of the previous century, what came onto the scene? Evolution, Darwinism. Darwinism came onto the scene. And I choose my words carefully here. Darwinism says, we don't even need the concept of a personal creator God. And with that, the concept that there's a personal creator God in which all truth resides, that concept for many people fell off the video screen of history. Can anyone tell me historically, what movement is this called? What movement? You all know it. But it might. Postmodern, no, but postmodern followed that. Naturalism followed this. The God is dead movement. See, God is dead is not like a number of pastors and few evangelists would preach. Oh, sure, God died. Oh, ha, ha. They missed the whole point. The God is dead is not that there was a physical God who died. It's that the concept that's a personal creator God in which all truth resides, that concept died. And it left man. out of this has come almost every major line of thought in the world today. Out of this with young people, right within the church, their ways of reasoning and everything came more out of this than out of the scriptures or out of church. Much more. Out of this came the greatest virtue in the history of the world. Far greater than freedom or justice. In fact, the number one virtue in the world today, by a number of people that believe it, adhere to it and all, absolutely dwarf justice and freedom. Can anyone tell me what it is? Tolerance. Came right out of here. You say, how'd that came out of here? Tolerance has gone through a complete change in meaning. So much so, I had to write a book on it called The New Tolerance. Almost every single time you ever hear the word tolerance, culturally, politically, religiously, or in education, almost always it means this. All values, all beliefs, all lifestyles, all claims to truth are equal. Because how can one person say to another person, your values, your beliefs are not as good as mine? Where's your external reference point? That's only your opinion. That's your perspective. Who are you to judge me? You should give me the freedom to term what is right for me, what is wrong for me, and live it out unhindered. You think I'm wrong on that? Where do you think you get one of the biggest phrases used in youth culture all over the world today that's behind so much of what they say and do? It's this. Well, it might be true for you, but it's not true for me. Came right out of here. You can't understand a young person in the church unless you understand that. It might be true for you, but it's not true for me. Out of here came the other great virtue in the world, multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is tolerance applied to culture. Has nothing to do with the color of your skin, your racial background, nothing. Your ethnic, multiculturalism has nothing to do with that. Multicultural can, but not multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is tolerance applied to culture. That all cultural values, all cultural beliefs, all cultural lifestyles, all cultural claims to truth are equal. Because how can one culture judge another culture? That's only your cultural value. Where's your external reference point? Out of this came the other great virtue in the world today, diversity. I wish people get it through their thick skulls. Diversity, philosophically and culturally, has nothing to do with racism, the color of your skin, or anything. You say, what? No. Diversity means with all of our diverse values, with all of our diverse beliefs, with all of our diverse lifestyles, with all of our diverse claims to truth, all are what? Equal. Diversity is equality in the midst of diversity. It all came right out of here. Let me show you some of the implications of it, apart from the belief systems. The epistemological shift has caused, for the first time, I think, in the history of America and most countries in the world, is caused a cultural divide. For one of the first times ever, we not only have two generations, adults and youth, parents and kids. We now have two absolutely, completely, totally distinct cultures. I can sit here and tell you, your kids don't think the way you do, the overwhelming majority of them. They don't even reason the way you reasoned. Used to be that you thought in the same way that your great-grandfather thought. You process truth in the same way your grandfather or grandmother did. Now it doesn't even go one generation. Right within the same evangelical, fundamental, born-again Christian home, there's two totally distinct cultures. Say, Josh, we've always had two generations. I'm not talking about generations. If I were, I would use the term generation. We not only have two generations, we have two totally distinct cultures within the same evangelical home. The problem is most kids know it and the parents don't, and neither does the pastor. Right when he gets up to speak, two totally different cultures. Let me show you some of the implications of the two cultures that come out of the epistemological shift. One, for the older culture, for almost all of you here, there's a few students in here. Say if you're 30, 28, 27 years old or younger, you're in one culture, older, you're in another culture, and anywhere from about maybe 25, 35, you got a foot in two cultures. It can be a little confusing. For the older culture, almost all of you here, the way you were raised, the way you were taught, the way you were conditioned, and the way your thinking was formed. To you, truth is discovered. All moral truth is discovered. In other words, it's basically objective, it's external. You shall know the truth. You shall discover the truth, and the truth will set you free. To an average young person, that's crazy. To the average young person, all truth, all moral truth is created. It's all personal perspective, personal opinion. You don't discover truth, you create truth. I was speaking at that huge Sunday school convention in St. Paul, Minnesota. And about 25, 30 students came. It used to be St. Paul Bible College. What's it called now? Crown or Vanguard or what university? Was for years the famous St. Paul Bible College. And they changed name. But 25, 30 students came for them. And I spoke on something similar to this. And I sat there and I saw the adults didn't get it. They really didn't. They just didn't get it. When I finished speaking, I walked down and sat on the front over in the left. Immediately, these 25, 30 students got up, came right down the center. Why, the MC was wrapping everything up and giving it out, came right down, crowded all around front of me, and their number one theme was, they don't get it, do they? Right in the same room, all believers. And the youth said, with all these leaders, pastors, and said, they don't get it, do they? I said, what do you mean? They think you discover truth? Wow. Right at St. Paul Bible College. What are some of the implications of it? What is developed out of this progression? I'll name it. I was at an Assembly of God, their National Youth Convention. And the first night at 8 o'clock, I spoke on truth. The next morning, in fact, I went around to 6 people and I said, define truth, define truth. Nobody could define truth. Almost nobody can. Maybe in this room here, one person could. It's been years since I found anyone in a random interview who can define truth. It's incredible to me. 95% of Christians cannot define 95% of the terms they use. I can't remember the last time somebody could define love. Literally, it's crazy. Purity. I've never had anyone in 52 years define purity in a random interview. Pastors' conventions, everything to ever define purity. One of the most beautiful, incredible words and concepts in the Bible. Well, the next morning, I had breakfast with 7 youth pastors. We were walking out of the breakfast thing, walking into where I was going to give my second talk at the convention. And this young man came up. He was probably about 15, 16 years old. And I was talking with these youth pastors, and he just bursted in. He was so excited. He says, I know the answer to the question. And I said, what question? I kind of forgot what he was talking about. Well, one of the other questions I asked, do you believe the Bible is true? Everyone said yes, but not one person at convention could tell me why. I can almost never. 99% of the people I interview in random interviews cannot give me any intelligent answer whatsoever why the Bible is true. And yet they'll be dogmatic and say, I know it's true. Well, then why don't you believe the Quran too? Because the Muslim is dogmatic and they can't give the answer either, that the Quran is true. And the Mormons of the Book of Mormon, it's incredible. Whether you're a Christian, a Mormon, a Muslim, or what, you can't give an intelligent reason why you believe it's true usually. And so I said, why? And he held up his Bible. Or I said, what question? He held up his Bible of why I know it's true. I got to admit, I got a little excited. I thought, wow, finally, someone knows the answer. I mean, look, there's over 100 answers. I could sit here for probably 5 hours without notes and give answers why I believe the Bible's true. And he said, he held it. I got all excited. I said, wow, this is kind of neat. I said, why? He said, because I believe it. Which is one of the biggest answers you get. I said, because you believe? He said, yes, because I believe it. And the 7 youth pastors applauded. A dumb, idiotic answer like that, and they applauded it. So I said, let me ask you a question, young man. Is it true for your friends at school? He said, well, no, not unless they believe it. I said, young man, you know the difference between you and me, and probably me and most Christians in the entire world. To you, it's true because you believe it. For me, I believe it because it's true. That's two totally, completely different approaches. Almost every Christian I ever meet, it's true because they believe it. And I'll say, no, you should believe it because it is true, but your believing doesn't make it true. It's like one of the dumbest things you hear. You believe the Bible's true? Yes. Why? Because I have faith. I go, oh my gosh, you gotta be kidding. Where'd you ever get that crazy, anti-biblical, heretical idea that anything is true because you have faith? God doesn't use faith to create truth. Through the Holy Spirit, He uses truth to create faith. In the same convention, I was going around something else about the deity of Christ. And so I said to him ahead of time, who is your this was Assembly of God, who is your sharpest youth pastor? They said, oh, that guy in the third row in the first seat. He's been through all of our theological training and everything. I said, wonderful, because I wanted a positive answer. So I walked him. I said, do you believe Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God? Yes. I said, why? He said, because I have faith. And 2,800 students broke out applauding. I said, that's crazy. A Muslim has faith that Muhammad is the greatest prophet ever lived. I said, does that make Muhammad the greatest prophet? He said, no. And I said, why does it make Jesus the Son of God? I said, it doesn't. Where did we get that crazy idea that faith creates truth? No, God through the Holy Spirit uses truth to create faith. Now, not to most Christians. See, most Christians, I would say 95% use the term faith. It's a blind faith, not a biblical faith. A biblical faith is an intelligent faith. But see, to most people, it is a blind faith. Dr. John D. Caputo, former professor of religion, he's now professor of religion emeritus at Syracuse University. He said, the cold hermeneutical truth is the truth that there is no truth. No master name, umbrella, universal, which holds things together. Dr. Richard Rorty. Boy, he's written some incredible books that would destroy your faith. He said, for the pragmatist, true sentences are not true because they correspond to reality. Whoa. And so there is no need to worry what sort of reality, if any, a given sentence corresponds to. No need to worry about what makes it true. Because where's your external reference point? It's all personal perspective, personal opinion. Dr. Hans Kenner, professor of rhetoric and historical discourse for years at the University of Texas, said about truth in relationship to reality or personal judgment, said, whew, these are the ones influencing students. I would like to clarify my position and say that truth ceased to be a relationship and has become a personal judgment. Why? Where's your external reference point? It doesn't matter if your truth corresponds with reality. The correspondence theory of reality. It doesn't matter. Why? Because it's all personal. Whew. Dr. Thomas A. Helmbrook, executive director of the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity, Dr. Helmbrook, summing it up, put it this way. Today is that every individual's belief, values, lifestyle, and perceptions of truth claims are equal. There's no hierarchy of truth. Your beliefs and my beliefs are equal, and all truth is relative. Why? Where's your external reference point? That's affecting almost every kid in every church in the world. Dr. Edwin J. Delate, the dean of Boston University School of Education, talking about today's enlightenment approach, involves the elevation of all values and beliefs to a position of equal respect. All. Osama bin Laden, whatever. Why? Where's your external reference point? There is none. Hayden White, if you read any book on philosophy or whatever, they usually footnote him with his meta-history. He was professor for years of consciousness at the University of California in Santa Cruz. He just bluntly said, truth is produced, not found. Do you get that? In other words, it's created, not discovered. Why? Because where's your external reference point? It's all personal. Personal opinion, personal perspective. After Columbine, I got a letter from a young man I'd known who was part of the Columbine situation of the healing and all. A young man, he was 17 years old, a student, and he sent me this email. He said, Josh, I was sharing the gospel with the guy that sits next to me in my class. After he let me share, he turned to me and said, I really respect you, Josh. His name was Josh Weidman. I respect what you believe, but it's not what I believe. I said, thanks, but it is the truth. He replied saying that it was only my truth, not his. Josh went on to say, my generation is confused. We live in a world that prides itself with many truths. We have been taught and encouraged to be tolerant. Everything and every way and everyone is right to my generation. We hear that it's politically correct to think that there's not only one truth, but many. That no religion is all truth. The impact of this progression historically and the way it's affected society, it's come up with definitions. The Random House defines tolerance as a permissive attitude towards opinions and practices that differs from one's own. If you are not permissive, you're intolerant. The Webster Dictionary, to recognize and respect others' beliefs and practices without sharing them. To bear or put up with someone or something not especially liked. That's the historical definition of tolerance. Now listen to it. The British philosopher R.M. Hare put it this way. Tolerance is a readiness to respect. Now, respect means, in the philosophical term here, to praise. A readiness to respect or praise other people's ideas as if they were his own. Fernando Sabater, the Spanish philosopher, in his book, The Nations Within Spain, or The Nations Within a Nation, he said tolerance, the doctrine in vogue, is that all opinions are equal. Each one has its point, and each one should be respected. That is to say, there's no rational, intelligent way to decide between them. Where's your external reference point? Dr. Harold O.J. Brown, some of you knew of him, he's not alive now. He summed it up just before he died this way, of what's happening in our culture. All convictions about values are of equal validity, which says, in effect, there's no convictions about values that have any validity. The Scholastic's Children's Dictionary. Tolerance is a willingness to respect or praise or accept the customs, beliefs, and opinions of others. This is why, when you look at the stats today, across of evangelical, fundamental, born-again Christian kids, their sharing of Christ with others is going just like this. Why? A lot of adults can't understand it. See, when you stood up and you would say, Jesus is the only way. The Bible is true, the only way. Christ is the way, the truth, and life. For the most part, it wasn't thrown back in your face. it didn't really fly so much in the face of the cultural dictates around you. Today, that's totally changed. It is probably 100 times harder for a young person to stand up and say Jesus is the only way today than you ever dreamed of as an adult. Because it's flying in the face of everything in their culture and even in many of their churches. And the statistics are showing that. And it's one of the motivations of, well, why do I have to study why the Bible is true? It doesn't matter because all religions are true. This is what's killing missionary service. What right do we have? Oh my gosh, these are evangelical, fundamental, born-again Christian kids. What right do we have to go to other cultures and say what they ought to believe? It is filtered right down into right where we live. In many high schools, there's a booklet called The Quest for Excellence that's used for training leaders. It says, it is up to you to decide upon your own value system, to build your own ethical code. You will have to learn what is right for yourself. Do you see the implications of that? That would justify rape, murder, child trafficking, everything that would justify. This is happening almost overnight when you look at the entire historical perspective. One young lady, a 16-year-old from Paris, Texas. Her parents are leaders in the church. Her father is a deacon. I showed up there to do a citywide campaign for young people. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is right here, her direct quote. The youth pastor of First Baptist came to me. He said, Josh, I need your help. I said, what's the problem? He said, I want you to read something that probably one of the top 3 students in my youth group. She's one of the leaders. She was asked in her high school 2 weeks ago to do a column on truth in the campus newspaper. And he handed me the newspaper. I said, see what she wrote. She started out, what is truth? Is it always the same? I don't think so. Truth changes constantly with time. It always varies from person to person and from different circumstances. What is true today will not be absolutely true tomorrow. What is absolutely true tomorrow will not be absolutely true the next day. What was truth yesterday is not absolute truth today. Therefore, there is no absolute truth. She probably mirrors the majority of kids in evangelical, fundamental, born-again Christian churches. I think it's even reflected the way we learn much about truth in culture. After 9/11, I wrote quite a large digital book called The Church and, the America and the church has lost the right to judge. To prepare for that, I went and bought, it was either 12 or 15 textbooks used in junior high and high schools for teaching how to make moral choices. I'm hardly ever surprised in research because I live with it all the time. You can go to my website, josh.org, and you can download $2 million of research free. I spend $200,000 to $300,000 a year just in research. You have to write the books that I write. You've got to do your research. And this is what every single one of the books said. It either gave 2 or 3 choices for making moral choices, decisions. The first step was always evaluate the decision. Evaluate the decision. Second, look at the different alternatives. This is what taught to kids in junior high and high school. Third, see if you catch this. Choose the alternative that is best for you. Not which one is true. Not which one is best for the greatest number of people. Not which one causes no. Every single book, and I documented it all in the book. Choose the alternative that is best for you. I mean, I'm not sure how a teacher with a clear conscience, you could be the greatest heathen in the world, could teach that. That justifies any evil historically. Any evil. You lose the right to judge. I did a pastor's seminar in the Northeast, about 1,500 pastors. They'd asked me to speak on tolerance, so I did. At lunch, there was a pastor there I'd known for years, and he and his 16-year-old daughter took me out for lunch. And we were sitting, there were many other pastors in this little diner, and his daughter, 16-year-old daughter, I remember the day she was born. I can remember the day she was born. Probably held her in my arms in the first year. His daughter spoke up, 16 years old, and said, I don't think we should judge. Oh, I hear this all the time. I don't think a Christian should ever judge. Don't you know the Bible says, judge not lest you be judged? And her father, I looked at the pastor, sat there so proudly, man, his chin pumped up. Almost everyone, she said it so passionately, almost everyone in the diner heard her. So I stood up. I put my hands on the table, leaned over this far in front of her. My whole family was just at her wedding. I couldn't make it because I was in another speaking situation. Leaned over, and I said, young lady, do you know what you have just done? You just gave up the ability to judge the difference between Osama bin Laden and Bonhoeffer. Judge not, lest you be judged. You just gave up the right to judge the difference between the wheat fields of Kansas and the killing fields of Cambodia. You just gave up the right to child trafficking or educating a child. Judge not, lest you be judged. And yet her dad, a top pastor in Northeast, just was beaming. And I couldn't take it anymore. We must get back to communicating truth in a way that this culture understands it, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, in a way this culture understands it, in an objective way. It's quite interesting, and I predicted this for years, that apologetics is going to come back in full force, and it has, among young people. I cannot believe the interest among young people. I just did the national convention of the National Youth Convention of Calvary Chapel. And I used an illustration, a physical illustration, I'm going to use tomorrow morning. Very unusual. None of you have ever seen it ever done. And when I finish, it's about how I can hold the Bible in my hand objectively and with evidence say what I have is what was written down. It's not been changed. With objective evidence I'm going to show tomorrow morning. And afterwards, 95% of all the students came up. I have never heard such incredible questions everything, analyzing, comments. And we added another meeting because they wanted to hear more about the evidence. You would have never had that 10 years ago. It's starting to come back, and we must step in and meet that. I want to throw it open for questions. We have 10 minutes, I think. What time? I got... I got 11 to 11. I thought I was supposed to go to 11. You tell me.
You've got 10 minutes for questions. The acoustics in here are fine, so just speak loudly and he'll be able to hear you.
Hey, yeah.
At the beginning, you said you chose your words very carefully when you were speaking of Darwinism, and I'm glad that you did that. Would you make a distinction between naturalistic evolution and theistic evolution?
Oh, gee. That's not my subject today. So I'm going to choose my words carefully. There's definitely a difference in what they're called. Another question.
Do they not see that stating that you can't say this, that they're making absolute statements, that they're contradicting themselves?
The majority, I do not think, do. And if you point it out to them, it doesn't bother them because it's part of their worldview. You see, if you truly believe there's no objective truth historically or morally or philosophically or theologically, no objective truth, then what else can you believe? And I point out to them it doesn't do a whole lot of good. I'll point out to them, do you believe there are no absolutes? Absolutely. Was that an No. Is that an absolute? And for the most people, it doesn't even seem to faze them. Now, some who have a conscience, a good, clear conscience, it'll cause them to start thinking. Probably some of the best follow-ups I had from meetings in university was right over that issue. Right over that issue. Yeah. But I always try to put myself in the other person's position and not try to be biased. I can't be totally unbiased. And I try to reason, well, what is there else to believe if there is no external reference point? All truth is personal. Then what else is there to believe? When you see how, yes.
Just curious, you've been doing this for a long time, been following you for a long time. It's understandable to have attacks from the outside and then arguments for outside thinking. But in the last 20 years, the church itself, the young people itself, it's like an epidemic that the furthering of the gospel of truth, it seemingly has been under attack, even more so. Now, to create an argument against the outside is one thing, but to have to generate a dialogue to get to the people who grew up in this stuff.
It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or non-Christian, that your culture is going to have an effect upon you. Let me show you our challenge and how I thank God for Oklahoma Wesleyan. I was doing a fundraiser for another great university, Biola, who my son is. Hey, I don't mind mentioning 2 or 3 of the great universities in the world. They've learned so much from Oklahoma Wesleyan. But in their fundraisers, about 150 people there. It was over a weekend. And some powerful names economically, and several key pastors that you would all know their names. I made the statement, in today's culture, with the epistemological shift and what the other two parts of the storm I'm going to talk about this afternoon are even more devastating than this. More devastating. And I said, the church cannot do it. The church cannot provide the answer. A key pastor of a huge church, and I was milking him on. He stood there. Everybody, he sat up in his chair just like this. And you could sense in his whole body. So I just milked it more, added to it. It's impossible for the church. Finally, everybody was looking at him. And so I said, do you disagree with me? He said, yes, I do. I said, all right. We've known each other for years. You're a man of character, so I'm going to ask you to be very honest here in front of everyone. I said, in your church, which is huge, what is the average amount of time a week an adolescent is being taught not praise and worship, which nothing wrong with that. But what part of time in 1 week with the average student in your church is he directly, concretely taught the truth of his faith? Not just what to believe, but why to believe it. He said about 30 minutes, and then he caught himself. And the whole crowd went, oh. I said, that's right. In 30 minutes, in an hour, in 2 hours, you cannot combat what's happening. It is so powerful around us. It doesn't matter if you love Jesus. Even if you're homeschooled, you are affected by your culture. And 30 minutes to an hour a week cannot equip a child to answer hardly anything. And this is why I thank God for homeschooling, for Christian schools. And let me tell you, the Christian high schools are getting better and better and better. I've spoken in hundreds of them. I told Di, I said, you know what? Our young people are in pretty good hands. You know why? Everett, you know why? Almost all of them have gone to realize the basis of their education teaching must be worldview. They never had that before, Everett. The teaching of worldview. Because all research shows the one thing that impacts a child's life more than anything else, their worldview. And I said, honey, I never thought in 10 years I could see such a change in the quality of many of our schools. But this is why. Today, it's almost impossible to come up through junior high, high school, and into college and become a biblical follower of Jesus who is impacting his or her world. If you come up through this secular setting, the only thing that would help you beat that is that if you have the most incredible church, I mean incredible church that takes more than 30 minutes a week, and you have an incredible relationship with your parents who see such an emphasis that my child needs to know not only what they believe, but why they believe it. I said, that could offset it all. I believe in the future, you're not going to see a lot of top Christian evangelical influencers in the world that haven't come up through a Christian university like Oklahoma Wesleyan, because it's so powerful around. I think you're already starting to see it. So that's why even our Christian kids are so influenced by it. Yeah. And why I'm so thankful for young apologists coming along. Oh, there are some good ones. You're going to hear today Frank Turek, Abdul Murray, my son. There's a handful of them out there. I told Dottie, I said, wow, God is doing something among a certain generation, raising up people that can communicate. Another question. Back there and then down here. Yes, sir. Boy, does your head shine. Boy, it looks like you polished it or it's Shekinah glory.
So when you're in a very secular place and you're teaching, on truth, how do you explain it? How do you illustrate it? How do you try to exposit that so that people can understand it?
Tomorrow afternoon, that's my talk. Tomorrow afternoon.
Josh, can you take one more question? There might be time for transition.
Let me say this. I was at William and Mary, which is, I think, is the oldest university in America. And it was sponsored by InterVarsity. And it was an auditorium a little bigger than this. There were about 450 out, about 30 professors. And they asked me to speak on the relevancy of truth. Ooh, I love that. And so I started out, and I went around the auditorium, picked out professor students and everything, and said, do you believe there's truth? Well, sure. Define truth. Define. Not one person could. Not one person. Finally, I said to the whole audience, can anyone here define truth? Not one at William and Mary. Over to the left, this graduate student, this was, oh, I wish I had this video. He yells out, I don't know what it is, Mr. McDowell, but I've been looking for it my whole life. I thank God Susan Means University staff students are right over there, and they must have had a 3-hour conversation. But I walked away, see, it's no different in University of Michigan and others. How do you define truth? One more question.
How broad is this? Is this a North American, Western Europe?
Oh, it's all over the world. All over the world.
Even for
because of the internet. I'll talk about that this afternoon. I just came back from a month in China, 3 weeks in Korea, and then a week in Singapore. Same thing. I just came back where I did the university in Uruguay, which is the most secular country probably in the face of the earth, modeling itself after France. And I don't know how many times I asked different students questions about truth and everything. They couldn't answer it. They couldn't answer it. The last one with a hand up there with a 2 index. Yes.
So what you're saying is like we need to look at Jesus as our example. Like he said to the woman at the well, your wife, you're not married, but I'm telling you, you have 5 husbands. It's not that he wanted to judge the world because he came to save the world, not to condemn the world. So therefore, I do believe that the Jesus is the truth that was sent from the Lord to expose, to reveal the truth to us, so our light will shine in our darkness. It's not that we are having a truth so we could judge others, but we have a truth on our side so the Lord could set them free.
If we live the truth, our very life judges others. Ma'am, this afternoon come up to me and explain what it means. In 52 years of ministry, I've never had anyone tell me what John 14:6 means when Jesus said, I am the truth. One of the most incredible statements Jesus ever made. And this afternoon, now, I'll try to define that. But I want to get your opinion. But even better, when Pilate said, what is truth? How do we answer that as a Christian? There's some books out there that can help. One is, I had to team up with my son to do Unshakable Truth. Why are we losing so many with a high school graduation? And every book that I read on it, I finished saying, there's something missing. I realized it was. They were using a false premise on developing a worldview. They were going back to the first century church. That's a false premise. You say, what? Oh, yeah. I think any book that bases their premise of worldview in the first century church is going to have gross error. And that's why I wrote the book. Because one man after the first century church uttered 3 words that took the church from 25,000 to 20 million. And when I read it, I said, oh my gosh, this is the key to preaching truth. This is the key to a parent passing truth on to their child. Those 3 words that became 4 principles. The most relevant thing I ever read for the 21st century. Don't ever go back to the first century church to base your worldview. In many ways, you can say it was a failure. First 100 years, there were only about 25,000 believers. There were more Jehovah's Witnesses in 1 week. Don't think of that. But one man came on the scene under 3 words, became 4 principles, took the church from 25,000 to 20 million. Why? They changed the worldview with 3 words on there. And then Sean and I teamed up and took all the hardest question I've ever had in 1,250 universities I've lectured in, and took the 77 most difficult FAQs about God and the Bible and answered them on the 8th grade level with total documentation. And they can be very helpful. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to this afternoon.